You're listening to the Ball Talk Podcast with me, Ryan Bailey. This podcast is brought to you by Adapt Athletic Performance and Therapy. Head over to Instagram and give them a follow at adapt_clinic. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe or follow button as well. Without further ado, let's get straight into the podcast. Perfect. Episode 41 of the Ball Talk Podcast. So today we are previewing this weekend's All-Ireland Senior Football Championship semi-finals. Second time round, Kevin. Hopefully we get it right this time. I'd like to finally welcome, and hopefully we can actually make this one to YouTube, Kevin McStay. Kevin, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, very happy to do it with you, Rian.
No problem at all. Look at Kevin, as we said, we'll dive straight into things this weekend. Mayo, Tipperary, Dublin, Cavan. I'm sure you'll be at one of them yourself. Which one are you heading to? One of them?
Saturday doing Dublin against Cavan on Saturday in commentary, and then Sunday night show looking back at Mayo and Tipperary. We're looking back at both matches, I'm sure. The Sunday night show. Yeah, so busy weekend.
Perfect. So we'll start with the Saturday night. Dublin, Cavan. I only checked it there, I'd say about an hour ago, and the bookies had Dublin at 1-50 and Cavan are 16-1. So it's, they're fairly given their stance on things. Look, we know
you've a generous bookie, because the ones we were checking are 1-100, which of course doesn't reflect Cavan's odds. What it's more stopping people doing is putting big lumps of money on Dublin. But 1-50 is half what it was on Monday.
Yeah, it was an hour there just an hour ago is what I saw it on.
Oh dear.
So going into the Dublin Cavan game, we were only speaking about this a few weeks ago with Mayo with Donegal and Tyrone. Where do you look into a team to try and pick holes at them, and where can you attack? And for Cavan, where are they going to be looking at this weekend?
Well, I suppose first and foremost, they have to decide on what is their overall posture. Are they going to have a go, have a shot at it? Are they going to accept that they just cannot beat Dublin and go into damage limitation, which I couldn't see them doing? Like, the competitive animal in any sportsman will say, let's have a go. Let's not be beaten before the ball is thrown in. Now, that's not to suggest for a second that they aren't, they have an almighty task ahead of them.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to see them winning it. So what's the next best thing? That they keep it to single-digit defeat would be the target, and maybe low digit, maybe up to this 5, 6, 7. But at all costs, keep it below 10. Because once it gets away from you, I was just doing some numbers there in preparation for the weekend, and I just have it here somewhere. Another 24 hours, I'll have these in my head, but I don't have them fully in my head at the minute. But Dublin, Leinster Championship so far, +11, +22, +21, all double-digit wins against Westmeath, Laois, and Meath. Hammerings, game over early. And of course, that's what Cavan are facing. That's sort of that's the quality of the team they're facing, and it's very hard to see where they'll get joy in any particular position or any line of the field. This is not only is it a step up in class, it's a step up in terms of the playing surface and the speed of that surface and the size of that pitch, and their unfamiliarity with it, and Dublin's familiarity with it. And it's impossible for me, Rian, to make a case for for the areas that Cavan will get some sort of comfort. It really is that difficult of a task, and we can only see one result, of course. Now, I'll just put a small asterisk with that. In the build up to the Donegal match, I would have said pretty much the same.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I did on live television. Didn't give Cavan too much of a chance. But there were slightly other factors involved. It was Ulster Championship. The pitch was soft. Donegal did not play. Donegal went into it quite complacent, it would appear, and it just didn't happen. Dublin don't do these sort of things. Dublin complacency is just something that doesn't. It's this process that we've been talking about non-stop for the last few years. They have a way of going about their business, and they're a champion team. That's really how I will capture it for Dublin. They're just a champion team in all departments.
You made some very interesting points there on the Dublin, the margin that they're winning Leinster Championship games by, and I'm sure you saw John Kendallen's piece only last week as well, and that gave a great insight into some of the scoring averages that they've beaten Westmeath by over the years and stuff like that too. But just touching back on Cavan, you said there that they might go for the damage limitation side of things, or will they go for the game? Would it be fair to say that they can't go somewhere in between, that they've got to go for one or the other?
Absolutely, yeah. It's stick or twist. You can't get caught halfway up and not committed to one particular game plan. And my sense is that what they have to get, Cavan have to get a decent start. They have to get to the first quarter and be in contention. They can't be 7 down at the first quarter, or the water break, if we call it, give it its formal title, but essentially it is a quarter, a timeout at the quarter mark. They have to try and, that is their first major focus, that they get to that part of the game intact, and then that they maybe can get to half time in reasonable order. But that's a big ask, Rian. That's against the quality they're facing, playing in a pitch that they're so familiar with. That's a big ask for them. But they will target that. They will target that first quarter and try and get to half time so that your morale is intact.
Yeah.
That you haven't been destabilized by the scoreline, and therefore you have a basis of coming out for the second half and engaging again. But as you saw the last game involving Meath and the game before that with Laois and so on, Dublin have these things put to bed well before halftime.
Yeah. You made an interesting point a couple of weeks ago on commentary about the water break and how the majority of them are coming after a ball goes over the bar. Do you think it should be a set time?
Or wide,
sorry, yeah. But do you think there should be a set time, maybe around where
well, there is. Yeah, there is by regulation. It must take place between, off the top of my head now, again, I'll have this learned off in better shape by Saturday, but I think it's the 15th to the 19th minute. The referee has the discretion to call it there. It doesn't say particularly after a wide or a point. It says after a stoppage in play, which, my argument was that could include a stoppage in play further out the field.
Yeah.
Where the reset now is not as important. And I stand by that argument. And then I've noticed in recent weeks to absolutely exacerbate the idea that it's called on a wide or a kick out. And the argument, the team that's taken the kick out are under a huge disadvantage because the opposition have a minute during the water break to reset everybody and get them to push up and refocus on this particular kick out. And in general, then the opposition, the team not taking the kick out, win that break or win that ball primary or win the break, and therefore have the advantage of possession once again. And what we've noticed now as we've been looking at the water breaks, there's obviously 2 per game. Now, wouldn't you think the referee would have the good sense to make sure he gave one kick, he'd call a break on a kick out for, we'll say, a Sligo in the first instance,
You're right,
and then in the second half make sure he called it for Mayo, so there'd be one apiece. Well, no, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
In many cases, it's the same team ends up taking the 2 kickouts. So it's a daft introduction. We don't need it anyway. These water breaks, and at least if they're going to insist on giving the water break on a kick out or a wide, which I don't agree with, of course, but if they're going to insist on it, make sure it needs to give it to one apiece in each half.
Yeah, because once you made that point, I even went up to McHale Park to do coverage of the Mayo Leitrim Nicky Racker Cup semi-final, and even from that game I noticed it was like as if when you said it just switched something, that every time there was a water break I noticed that it was 95% of the time it was the same thing over and over again. than it was
Yeah.
from a kick out.
Yeah,
It was just
and believe it or not, the argument put forward about why they wouldn't call the water break on a stoppage out the field is because they were afraid the hurlers would score directly on the restart. So if you called it on a free around the midfield, obviously a hurler can point that on the restart, and you couldn't have that, obviously. But of course, my argument is, well, okay, have it on the puck out for hurling, but not for football.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
for another day.
For another day, definitely. We'll have to do a whole podcast on the water break. If there is one, if there's water breaks next year, as you said, it's hard to see there being a reason for them.
No, there's no reason for them, really.
We'll jump over Mayo Tipperary as well. Probably one of the more balanced fixture, if you can even call it a balanced fixture of the week.
Oh no, it is balanced. Oh, this is poised for sure.
You're looking forward to it?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to see, obviously, as a Mayo man, just to see where Mayo are at. And I was making the argument yesterday with the Mayo lads on the Mayo podcast, the Mayo News podcast, that like not technically, we absolutely don't know where Mayo are at, really, because the game against Roscommon and Galway was not hectic. There wasn't overwhelming by any means. There were good wins, very workmanlike wins, but you wouldn't call them top championship form or anything like that. So the hope is that Mayo are improving and getting towards what you need to be at by the time you get to the last four. My sense is they are that they will get to that level. But of course, they're meeting now a very, very energized and enthusiastic and confident Tipperary team. And also not a bad Tipperary team. Like, they've beaten Cork in a final against the odds, it would appear, even though they've well fancied themselves. They're quite experienced. They've Colin O'Riordan back from Australia. The 4 or 5 top players on top of that. And you contrast that to Mayo, I counted had 10 what we loosely call debutants stroke rookies in the Connacht final appearance. That's a lot of players, 10, that are helping reshape the latest Mayo transition, which is going very well in the circumstances of the year we're having. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, Rian. I think it's going to be quite a close contest for quite a while, but I believe Mayo will in the end get the win they deserve. I'm just hoping they'll do it. They'll show us a bit more than they've showed us so far, so that we can look forward to the possibility of them giving Dublin a right shot of it in the final. But if Tipperary were to win this game, it'd be a sensational result, obviously, because they haven't been in All-Ireland for maybe since the commemoration, I don't know, but around the in 1920s anyway, sometime back there, I guess. So it would be a sensational result if Tipperary to win it. Sensational in the idea that it's history making, but not sensational in terms of shock, surprise. Oh my God, could this have happened? Because this can happen in the exact same way as it happened that they beat Cork, in the exact same way that Cork beat Kerry or that Cavan beat Donegal. Absolutely, this could happen.
Where are the key matchups on Sunday now, do you reckon?
Yeah, the Mayo full forward line is very, very dangerous. And if they get their game together, they're going to cause untold damage to any full back line. They haven't just yet. Yeah, I think each of them are playing well as individuals. Each of them are playing particularly well as individuals. But they haven't come together as a unit, if that makes sense, I hope. And whether that's a two-man full forward line with Conroy feeding off the other two bigger men, or a one-man full forward line with O'Shea and Aidan O'Shea and Ciarán O'Connor and Tommy Conroy feeding off O'Shea, or Tommy Conroy going further out and playing off the two from a deeper position. Lots of different ways they could pan it up. But from the Tipperary perspective, is well, how are you going to stop this full forward line that has real potential, and of course the solution to that will be, because they don't have the three players that can handle the three Mayo lads one-to-one. They just don't have them. Very few teams would, in fact, have three markers to look after that sort of danger. So they're going to have to protect the D, bring a few players back. So that's a key area. midfield is, as always in Gaelic football, is a key area. And I think here now, Tipperary have every possibility of getting a swing. You have Matthew Ann coming back into really good form from Mayo, with Conor Loftus, who's still, making his way at this level, and certainly making his way in this position. It's a pretty new position for him. He's a half forward by nature, is my memory of him. And they're going to be up against Colin Reardon, and is it Liam Casey? I might have
Stephen O'Brien. No,
service. Maybe Stephen O'Brien, but Casey is in around that area as well. Big men, good footballers, athletic, mobile, and of course, all about O'Regan. A professional athlete in this environment, and he's got an extra couple of weeks now to get used to the ball and get used to conditions. So we'd expect he could only improve. That will be his nature. As a professional, he'll be trying to max out the last 2 weeks and get everything out of them in terms of prep. So, yeah, they're very likely to present huge problems for Mayo there. So there's possibilities there. Mayo defence looks decent. Mayo goalkeeper is excellent. David Clark, but then Evan Comerford is a very, very decent goalkeeper as well.
Absolutely,
for Tip. Yeah, so I see that game very well poised. I think Mayo will come out of it with the win, but it won't be simple.
Same as well as 4 years ago. Like it was Conor O'Shea that got the goal to put 4 points between them with a few minutes to go. Like that wasn't that was a very tight game as well. It wasn't straightforward, as you say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the bit that worries me a little bit, that, Mayo are just leaving teams hanging around the edges, and therefore it becomes dangerous when you're not putting teams away, and that can cause a problem for sure. But I'm expecting Mayo to, game manage the situation better and tighter, and that they will want to leave no room for error in this fixture. They don't want to leave Tipperary hanging around in the fourth quarter, because everything then gets tight, and literally anything can happen once it's tight after the last water break.
As you said there, Tipperary, if there is one position or one area of the field that they can get at Mayo, it will be around the middle. Can you see a change coming in the Mayo midfield, or even whether or not be from the start, it might be later on in the game? Could we see someone like Tom Parsons coming in?
I'm not so sure, Ian. I'm not so sure. You'll see Aidan O'Shea in for the throw-in, of course. But the hope, certainly my hope, because of the bigger picture, is that he would reside at 14 and give a pillar, a target for the Mayo attack, a framework for the Mayo attack to work off. But of course, if the boat was taken in water, he could always be brought out to midfield. I mean, that would probably be the first choice, rather than bringing on Tom Parsons, Seamus O'Shea, these sort of people. My sense is we haven't seen these guys because people have passed them out in training, and their form line isn't what James Horan might want it to be at. And some of these guys aren't even making the 26-3 anyway, when you check the fine detail on match day. I'd say Aidan O'Shea would be the backup, I imagine. Kevin McLaughlin, kind of, but not so much. But then they could play a three-man midfield if they wanted to shore it up a small bit. They're going to find it very hard, Mayo, to win that midfield battle man-to-man. If it was 2-on-2, if it's O'Brien, O'Riordan, or Casey and O'Riordan, whatever, matching up with Conor Loftus and Matthew Ruan, you can. It's obvious. You know this yourself. You're looking at the games the same as everybody else. That's a very formidable Tipperary midfield pairing. Did really well against Cork, and will have every sense coming into this game that they can do very well against Mayo in that area.
As you said as well, Tipperary, a team that looked confident. We saw Michael Quinlivan in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the points that he was kicking. He was like a player that was just on the training ground kicking for fun. Yeah,
well, he's a gorgeous player. I came up against him when I was managing Ross and Conor Sweeney, of course. They're lovely football, right? They're big men. They're big men, and they kind of move the ball very skillfully. and are well able to take their scores, well able to win their own ball. Then again, they are formidable opponents. They're two very good footballers, and they're the kind of anchor of the forward line. But then they have a lot of good workers, Maher, Fox, these guys, they're all around the area as well, and they will be contributing. You know they will. They're a nicely balanced team. They're quite experienced. They came up through the minor under-21 scene. They've been around now in Division 2, 3, All-Ireland semi-finals. The Galway one, do you remember the semi-final against Galway a few years ago?
Yeah.
And it wasn't it a quarter-final? Was it a quarter-final against us? It was.
No, it's quarter-final against Galway in 2016, and then they went on and played Mayo in the semi-final.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, but they won that match against Galway.
Bet Galway is right. Yeah.
But they did the semi-final. Yeah, and so they've been around. They know they've played at this level. They understand the requirements. So this is poised. This is very very nicely poised. People in Mayo mightn't see it that way. As I said to a friend of mine yesterday, I'm sure people in Mayo see this as straightforward enough. But I can tell you, down in Tipperary, they're looking at it in a very positive light from their perspective as well. They think this is a massive chance to get to an Ireland final.
Definitely.
And they'd be right.
Yeah. I'm just looking here. I'd sent out on Instagram a question poll if anyone had any sort of questions for you, and they're all surrounding the game anyways, and the majority of them are answered. But there's one we spoke. Well, this was probably 3 weeks ago now since we had initially recorded a podcast. It was the day before the Kerry and Cork game, if not 2 days before. And you went down to that game. That goal from Marquis in the last minute, I think your reaction summed up the reaction of the country in it. Would that be your moment of the championship so far?
Well, I was up in the athletic grounds when Cavan got the goal at the end. Oh God, it's gone out of my head now. The young fella that got the goal.
Conor Madden.
Was it 13? Yes, Conor Madden? Yeah, Conor Madden. And I tell you that was a fair moment, because even though there was no one in the ground, to use the bit of hyperbole, it felt like the ground shook. But it was a huge moment and a famous moment, obviously, for Cavan to win it. I wouldn't quite call it the moment of the champion. I'd say Mark King's one would be hard to beat, wouldn't it, really? Because it knocked out what possibly were the favourites for the All-Ireland, or joint favourites with Dublin. But the one team that everybody thought could push Dublin to the nth. I would say that probably was the moment of the championship so far, yeah.
With Cork beating Kerry this year, with Cavan beating Donegal, we've got Tyrone are going to want to come back and have a better year. So are Galway, so are Roscommon, so are Kerry. And then you look down, even in Division 4, there's counties with new management teams that are looking at the Cavans and the Tipperaries and saying, well, if they can do it, why can't we? It could be, the next year or so could be very, very competitive in the All-Ireland Championship.
I got a text literally about half an hour ago from a lad that works with RTE, and he put down exactly what you've just said. He said 2021 and 2022 are going to be huge years and a lot of fun for the GA, because there's going to be new structures, a new season. You're going to have Mickey Hart with Louth and so on, and new managers around the place, and teams coming and hopefully improving. And maybe Dublin coming back to the pack a little bit, but I'm not so sure about that. But maybe just a touch. We'll know a lot more by the 19th of December. But I think you're right. I think it has the makings. The next few seasons are going to be landmark seasons for the GA in terms of the split season, in terms of championship structure, and in terms of the various appointments. Linda McGinley went to Antrim as well. Don't forget that one.
Yeah.
Which is a big moment. And oh God, who did Sligo get again? It's gone out of my head.
Anthony McEntee. What do you make of that appointment?
Yes,
actually?
Yeah, I think that's a great appointment for Sligo. Super appointment for Sligo. And fair play to them. They dreamed big, and they got a guy with a lot of experience at club level, obviously, and as an All-Ireland winner, and then with the Mayo experience. So yeah, he's going. Well, I can guarantee you, the fella said maybe Sligo can't but improve, but with McEntee, I can guarantee you Sligo will improve. There's no question in my mind about that. He's a very good coach, very much into the fine detail of coaching and the fine detail of the numbers and statistics surrounding the football game and where the gains are to be got and things you have to tighten up on. So the old superintendent said, what gets measured gets done. And I think you'll be seeing a lot of that from Tony McEntee. What gets measured gets done, and he'll insist on that. And I can only see a big improvement coming from Sligo, and hopefully we now have back 4 teams that would be very competitive in the Connacht Championship.
Because even Eamon O'Hara was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and said that there are forwards in Sligo that he reckons are some of the best forwards in Connacht, with the Liam Gahans, the Niall Murphys, and Peter Naughton coming to Sligo next year is going to be a big boost as well.
Yeah. Well, we have to remain to be seen with Peter Naughton. Like we know he's had a great season with the Knockmore, but there's another level up now, Rian.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen. And the other lads, I know the lads you're talking about, Niall Murphy, etc. They're good footballers, but they haven't done it at a consistent level yet. But this might be the launch now for them.
Kevin, I think that wraps everything up. As we said, we'll keep it short and sweet. I'd like to thank you for coming on to the podcast.
My pleasure, Ian. My pleasure.